Chapter 32. Title. I don't know what to call it. Whoever can, come up with a title yourselves. I decided to tell Anastasia's grandfather about my new assistants. A lot of articles are now being written about Anastasia. She's being talked about in both academic and religious circles. One production team made up of very religious and considerate people offered me a deal to grant them, in return for payment, the exclusive right to interpret and comment on Anastasia's sayings in the mass media. I agreed. And for what amount, Vladimir, did you agree to sell them, Anastasia? The tone of his question and what he was getting at left a rather bad taste in my mouth, and I answered, "What do you mean, sell? I told them more about Anastasia than I wrote in the book. I told religious people so that they could offer their exclusive comments as well as their explanations of what she said. They want to meet with her. They're even ready to finance an expedition. I agreed. What's wrong with that?" The old fellow didn't respond immediately. Since no reply was forthcoming, I added, "They offered me money for an exclusive right. That's the way we do things. People offer services for money. They will earn even more from their publications." The oldster lowered his head and remained silent for a while. Then, as if thinking things over aloud, he said, "So you, in your enterprising way, sold Anastasia, and they, assuming themselves to be the most religious and competent people in the world, decided to buy her. Well, that's a pretty strange way of putting it. So when it comes right down to it, what did I do wrong? Tell me, Vladimir, didn't it ever enter your head or the heads of those religious people to think of asking, finding out, or realizing just who Anastasia herself wished to talk to and when, and how? And do people in your world go visiting without so much as an advance request to the host? I don't recall her asking anybody to visit her. If she didn't want to talk with them, she doesn't have to. She didn't sign any deal. But you did. She is ready to share what she knows with everyone, but it is her right to determine how she's going to do this. And if she has chosen to set forth in a book, and with your expression, who has the right to dictate or demand another? She made the choice herself, but somebody wants to change that, and the reason behind the effort to alter her choice is clear. She will not talk with people who put themselves ahead of everyone else. With people whose self-righteousness, she knows, will distort, overturn, and adjust to their own way of thinking the truths she holds sacred. Why paint such a dark picture ahead of time? These people are interested in many different teachings. They are very religious. It is they who have determined that they are the most religious of all. Religious self-righteousness is the apex in the most deadly of sins, pride. I began to be overwhelmed with an inexplicable sense of anger at myself. I had not yet received payment for the deal, and so I was able to break it. And shortly afterward, not seeing anything amiss, I signed another deal with one of the religious centers for the exclusive right to my own interviews. Once again, I was taken in by their considerate attitude and the religious knowledge they displayed, especially since this deal concerned me alone, and I could do with myself what I pleased. But once again, both they and I fell into a trap, and once again it turned out that I had indirectly sold Anastasia, and they had bought her. And this time it was not Anastasia's grandfather, but a Moscow woman journalist who, after reading the new agreement, flustered, "Boy, how stupid can you get? You've sold Anastasia real cheap. Take a closer look and see what the fine print says. You've signed over the right to others, an exclusive right to exploit and use as they see fit over the most powerful information channel there is. Everything you said relating to Anastasia. You've denied yourself the right to even question their opinion, no matter what it is. To what degree that's true, it's hard to say. Maybe I'd better cite a few of the points of the agreement here. Number 1. Subject of Agreement. 1.1. The author gives exclusive rights to all videotaping of himself, as well as to the use of any other video materials connected directly or indirectly with the production of Anastasia. Television programs, hereinafter referred to as programs. The above-mentioned transfer of rights to the contractor extends to all countries of the world. 1.2. The contractor undertakes at his own expense to prepare one copy of each 3 programs of between 30 and 40 minutes each on a professional Betacam recorder. 1.3. By mutual agreement between author and contractor, any interaction with video or film studios television, including cable TV, as well as the shooting of any video on any equipment, as well as the use of video materials on the given subject, is to be effected only and exclusively by the contractor. While this agreement is in force, the author waives the right to give video interviews and prepare any audio materials using the concepts or terms that are in the programs, either directly or indirectly. After analyzing all the events connected with the writing, publication, and distribution of the Anastasia book, I came to the conclusion that people who call themselves strongly religious have a dark side which they themselves fear, and thus keep trying to assure others and persuade them of their religiosity. They are probably afraid that people will discover their dark side. It is so much simpler with entrepreneurs. Their actions and goals are more open, less obscured, and consequently they are also more honest to themselves and to those around them, to society. It's possible I am mistaken, but you can't get away from the facts. 3 Moscow students keyboarded the text of Anastasia. They had no expectations of compensation any time soon. They never talked about any religious matters. The book was published by the manager of Moscow Print Shop No. 11, a retired officer by the name of Gennady Vladimirovich Gruzia, at his own expense. The print run was small, and there wasn't even a thought of breaking even. Gruzia, an entrepreneur, never talked of religious matters either. The next run was paid for by the business manager of the Moscow Publishers' Clearance House, Yuri Anatolievich Nikitin. But then it turned out he wasn't dealing in books at the time. He gave me the greater part of the print run to sell. He set no deadline for getting a return on his investment, and he, too, never talked about religious matters. And then the religious people began putting in their 2 cents worth, and a print run of 45,000 was released by an underground press. When this religious firm was discovered, they started proclaiming their religiosity and desire to produce bright things, and even promised to pay authors royalties. They still keep promising that, and that's not the only case. Religious people generally seem to be very neglectful of accounts, especially when they're the ones who owe money. As to the transfer of exclusive rights, I have decided to make it clear on the pages of this book. I shall no longer give exclusive rights for the interpretation of Anastasia's sayings to anybody. And if anybody challenges me on that, let people know that I have not given anything voluntarily. Why do I say voluntarily? The Moscow journalist who helped me break the contract soon became the target of anonymous threats. Who made them? What did they want? What kind of religion do they profess? They support their religion by extortion. Well, I know what the extortion racket is all about. After all, there are human beings there too. And I want to warn them. Be careful around religious people. And before getting into anything, consider calmly and carefully where these religious people are taking you. There's more. In the first book, I wrote that I had invited Anastasia to come to Moscow herself and appear on our TV, but she refused. I couldn't understand why at the time, but now it is clear to me what she foresaw. Even after the book came out, there have been many interpretations of what she said. Many quite different interpretations. Some are interesting, some are controversial, but among others one could clearly trace the desire on the part of certain people to interpret her in a manner that would serve their own interests. Direct challenges were thrown in my way, for example. So, you think alone you have the right to talk with her? You don't understand everything. Let others speak with her, more will come out of it. But she is not an object to hand over to someone. She is man, and she herself has the right to decide how she will act, whom she will speak with, and what she will say. Now it's become clearer than ever that Anastasia is really being subjected to attack by visible and invisible throng of dark forces in the guise of fanatics and self-seekers. Back in the first book, I quoted Anastasia as saying, "I know what a terrible mass of dark forces will descend upon me, but I'm not afraid of them. I will succeed in raising my son. I will succeed in seeing my plan come true, and people will be carried across the dark forces windows of time." In Anastasia's world, they instruct their children up to 11 years of age. In other words, she has at least another 10 years she can hold out. "And then what?" I asked her grandfather. "Is she bound to perish?" "It's hard to say," the old fellow answered. "They all died quite a bit earlier compared to her, and more than once she has embarked on a journey foretelling physical death, but each time at the last moment the law has flared up, forgotten it may be. But it is still strong enough to overrule anything else. It has illuminated the essence of the truth about earthly existence, and it has caused life to remain in her earthly body." The old man fell silent, and once again, preoccupied in thought, began tracing some sort of symbols on the ground with his stick. I too began thinking, wondering how on earth I got myself involved in a situation like this. But the thing was, I couldn't very well walk away from it now. It might have been possible earlier, but not now, because of the child. Anastasia had given birth to a son. Even though she'd rather devote herself to caring for the child and raising him, she's not going to abandon her dream, to carry people across the dark forces window of time. And she will not, because she's really very stubborn. Someone like her will not walk away. And who will help her, naive as she is? If I should renege on my promises, she's got nothing left. She'd go to pieces. And that's something that should not happen to a nursing mother. She's got to finish her breastfeeding at the very least. And so I asked her grandfather, "Is there anything I can do for Anastasia?" Try to figure out for a start what she's talking about and what she wants. Then aimless wandering will give way to understanding, and a wave of warmth will cheer the heart. And over the world will be unfurled a new dawn. "Can you make it any more specific?" I asked. "It's hard for me to formulate it in any more specific way. The whole important thing is sincerity in all. So start by doing what is dictated by your heart and soul." She told me about a particular Russian provincial town, I remarked. Said something about it possibly becoming richer than Jerusalem or Rome, because all around are many sacred sites of our forebears. Sites more significant than the temples at Jerusalem. Only the local people do not have sufficient conscious awareness to discern them. I want to go there and change their conscious awareness. "That's not something that can be done quickly, Vladimir." "Well, you see, I didn't know it could be done, and so I promised Anastasia. There must be some way of bringing about a change." "Since you didn't know it could be done, you shall change it indeed." "More power to you. And now it's time for me to go." "I'll see you off." "Don't waste your time. No need to see me off. Think about what you have to do." The old fellow got up and offered me his hand. I watched Anastasia's grandfather recede into the distance along a tree-lined boulevard and thought of my forthcoming trip to the city of Glensick, remembering what Anastasia had told me about it. And it was no mere chance conversation. Chapter 33. Your Sacred Sites, O Russia. I asked Anastasia, "Do your people often come across ringing cedars?" "Very, very rarely," she replied. "Perhaps 2 or 3 in 1,000 years. Right now, apart from this one that has been saved, there is one more, and it can be sawed up and used for its designated purpose." "What does that mean, used for its designated purpose?" "What is its purpose?" "The great intelligence of the universe, God, who created man and his environment, no doubt had the foresight to give people the opportunity to restore their lost abilities, to use the wisdom accumulated in the non-material world. This wisdom has existed right from the start, but man's ability to perceive it has been lost through sinfulness. My grandfather and great-grandfather told you about the ringing cedar and its extraordinary healing properties. What they did not explain was that its pulsations and rhythms are close to that great intelligence. If they are merged and combined, as it were, with the rhythms already present in many people, then a man who places the palm of his hand on the warm trunk of a ringing cedar, and runs his hand over it as though caressing it, thereby attains the possibility of communicating with the infinite expanse of wisdom. Such a man is capable of becoming aware of many things in the scope of his thinking at the moment of contact or thereafter. This happens in varying degrees with each individual. I am telling you about the highest manifestation. But why does it happen differently? Does the cedar choose to give its power to one person and not to another? Its operation is identical in each case. Its rhythm and vibration are always the same. But some people can tune into it and feel it to the full, while others detect just a light touch. Many people don't feel anything at all to start with. But conscious awareness will gradually come even to those without feeling. At least they have a greater possibility of feeling it. I still don't quite understand. What kind of selection takes place? Vladimir, please try to read my lips. The difference is not in the power of the tree, but in the man. All right. I have found it. An example. Music. You know, when music is playing. Music, too, after all, consists of vibration and rhythm, but some people listen to it attentively. They begin to have feelings from it, sometimes even tears of joy and tenderness. Others listen to the same music but feel nothing, or do not care about listening to it at all. The same with the cedar. Only those who are capable of feeling and understanding will hear anything much at all. And this much is something that will gradually unfold itself to them. It comes during the moments when man feels like pondering it. Women can gain the strength and wisdom of their pristine origins. They can fulfill their designated purpose and make both themselves and their chosen men happy, as well as their children they give birth to in love. And here the miracle is not in the cedar, but in human aspirations. The cedar simply assists them. It is not the major contributor to noble deeds. That's incredible. It's like some kind of tempting, beautiful legend. You do not believe me? You think that what I am saying is only a legend? Why, then, did you make such an effort to come here? And why were you so eager to have me show you the ringing cedar? Well, I don't think it's all a legend. At first, I too didn't believe that your grandfather and great-grandfather said about the cedar. Later, after I returned home from the expedition, I read the popular scientific literature and got to know what scientists were saying about its healing properties. And I was struck by the fact that scientists and the Bible were on the same wavelength. But I never found a hint anywhere of the cedar being used to feel a link with the great intelligence of God, or God as you describe it. Either you did not pay close attention to what the scientists or the Bible were saying, or you missed the main point. Otherwise, you would not be doubting my words. Then what could I have missed? There are only 2 references to cedar in the Bible, when God teaches how to treat people with their help, and then how to disinfect one's home. But the Bible also talks about King Solomon as one of the wisest rulers that ever lived, one revered by his people. King Solomon, you will agree, is a historical personage. He was no legend. So? And the Bible also says that this king built God a temple of cedar and a house for himself beside it, also made of cedar. And in order to get to the cedar, he hired more than 30,000 workers to bring it from another country. And to get the cedars cut down, Solomon asked another king named Hiram to give him people skilled in the felling timber. Getting this cedar cost Solomon 20 cities of his kingdom. Think, why did the wisest of all rulers need to go to such expense and build his temple and house out of material which was less sturdy than what he had on hand already? Why? You can find the answer to that too in the Bible, where it says, "And it came to pass, when the priests were come out of the holy place, that the cloud filled the house of the Lord, so that the priests could not stand to minister because of the cloud, for the glory of the Lord had filled the house of the Lord." You can find indirect proofs of this in the works of your prominent scientists. That's great. Something I think I can believe in. It means the cedar will reveal many secrets to people. Show me the ringing cedar that can be sawed up. I'll bring it to a city with easy access for people from all over the world wishing to touch it. Where will you find a city on the earth where the inhabitants will not simply desecrate the sacred cedar, but actually ensure its protection and provide a suitable exhibition space and access for visitors? I'll try to find one. Tell me, why have you concluded that it's going to be such a difficult task? People's consciousness today is too bound up with the programs of the technocratic world. They are becoming biological robots. What kind of biological robots? The technocratic world is structured in such a way that man keeps on inventing all sorts of mechanical devices and social orders supposedly to make his life easier. But in fact, any saving of labor is an illusion. Man himself is becoming a robot of the technocratic world. He never has enough time to contemplate the essence of being or listen to what another is saying, and no time either to reflect on his own destiny. He is literally a programmed robot. Here you are seeing everything with your own eyes, and hearing it with your own ears, and still you find it hard to believe. Anastasia, with me it's a different story. I cannot call myself a strong believer. I believe in general, but probably not the same way other people do. In our world right now, there are a lot of people who truly do believe. Many read the Bible. They will grasp it immediately. They see how much the Bible talks about the cedar. They will believe and take good care of your little piece of cedar. There are many different kinds of belief, Vladimir. It often happens that a man will hold in his hands the Koran or the Bible or another book containing the wisdom of the ages and say that he believes, and even try to teach others, whereas in fact he is simply attempting, as it were, to make a deal with God. Look here, I believe in you. Remember that in case anything happens. What then is belief or faith? I inquired. How should it be expressed? In one's way of life, in one's perception of the world, in the understanding of one's essence and designated purpose, in one's corresponding behavior and relationship to the environment, in one's thinking. So, just believing is not enough? Just believing is not enough. Imagine an army. All the soldiers, down to the last one, believe in their commander, but they do not go into battle. They have such strong faith in him that they will trust he will win in any case. So the soldiers sit back and watch as their commander goes up alone against the enemy forces. They sit there in a state of frenzy and call out, "Go, go, go! We believe in you! We know you can do it!" That's no help, Anastasia. You didn't make a real analogy. Those kind of absurdities simply don't happen. Those kinds of absurdities do happen in real life, Vladimir. Then give me an example from the concrete realities of our life, and not something made up. Fine. There is a city in Russia called Gelensik. It has a noble purpose, to be a place where people can go to relax from their daily grind, a place to meditate and touch sacred sites. There are many sacred sites in and around this city which are more significant than those found in Jerusalem, more significant than the pyramids of Egypt. This city could be one of the richest cities in the world, richer than Jerusalem or Rome, but the city is dying. It is a resort town. All its houses and hotels are becoming empty and decaying. The materialistic consciousness of the local authorities prevent them from seeing the treasures which are capable of making the city flourish. When they talk about the city, they emphasize the sea, the artificial treatment facilities available, and the fact that the local hotel rooms are equipped with bedside tables and fridges. They do not even mention the sacred sites. They know little about them themselves, and do not want to know. Their priorities lie elsewhere. There are many people living in this city who call themselves believers, people of many different denominations. Some of them actively engage in proselytizing. What faith do they proselytize? With their attitude to their surroundings, they have been and still are violating the very commandments contained in their sacred books. In the Bible, for instance, where it says, "Love thy neighbor as thyself." But you have to know your neighbor before you can love him. You cannot love whom you do not know. But they, the ones who call themselves believers, do not know their neighbors, or even their forebears who lived in that sacred land, and left them inexhaustible treasure of sacred sites as their legacy. Our ancestors have carried with them over the millennia waves of wisdom and the light of their own soul. Many people call themselves believers, yet do not notice what is sacred around them, the sacred sites which have been left them by their ancestors to help them. What kind of sacred sites could possibly be found in a city like that? You see, Vladimir, near the city of Gelenzek can be found growing the Lebanese cedar mentioned of so many times in the Bible. And this living, direct creation of God talked about so much even before Christ Jesus' coming to the earth, is located right next to this city. It is only 100 years old. It is still but a stripling, though already very beautiful and sturdy. It has grown there because it was planted by a worthy man. He was a writer named Korolenko. Thanks to his erstwhile popularity, the cedar has been protected with a surrounding hedge. But today the house where he lived is in a state of decay, and people are not paying attention to the tree he planted. And what about the believers? Many of the people in the city who call themselves believers pay no attention either to the tree or the other great sacred sites of their forebears. They are destroying them, and the city is dying. That means God's punishing them in some kind of vengeance? God is good. He is never vengeful. But what can he do when his creations are ignored? That's amazing. Can such a tree really exist? I must look into that. It exists, and there are many other sacred sites around the city, but people treat them from a technocratic point of view, like the pyramids of the wise pharaohs. What? How do you know about the existence of the Egyptian pyramids? Thanks to generations of my forebears, the ability has been preserved within me to communicate with the dimension where thoughts and wisdom reside. This communication gives one the opportunity to learn anything one might wish to know, anything that captures one's interest. Hold on a moment. Let me test you. Answer me. Do you know the secrets of the Egyptian pyramids? I do, just as I know that those who investigated those pyramids were constantly working from a material standpoint. They were basically interested in how they were constructed, the dimensions and relations of the sides to each other, what the treasures were hidden inside, what things were to be found there. They considered people living at the time of the pyramids were built to be superstitious. They regarded the pyramids only as a means of preserving the pharaoh's valuables, their bodies, their glory. Thus they distanced themselves from what was fundamental, from what was consciously designed. I don't understand you, Anastasia. What conscious design were they distancing themselves from? Anastasia didn't speak for some time, staring, it seemed, somewhere off into infinity. And then she began telling her remarkable story. You see, Vladimir, way back in ancient times, people living on Earth had the capacity to use wisdom and intelligence far surpassing the abilities of modern man. People of the time of the Earth's pristine origins enjoyed ready access to all the information in the entire database of the universe. This information filling the universe was created by the great intelligence, God, with the contributions both from Him and from people themselves, their thoughts. It is so superb. that it is capable of answering any question unobtrusively. The answer would appear instantaneously in the subconscious of the man asking the question. And what did it give these people? These people needed no spaceships for traveling to other planets. All they had to do was wish for it, and they could see what was happening there. These people needed no television, telephone, or communication wires ensnaring the earth. Not even literacy, since all the information you derive from books they were able to obtain instantaneously by other means. These people needed no industries producing medicines or drugs. They could get all the best remedies possible simply by a gentle wave of the hand, since whatever they needed is available in nature. These people needed none of your modern transportation devices. They did not need cars or food processing complexes, for everything was supplied to them. They knew that a change in climatic conditions in one part of the earth was a signal to them to move to another part, so that the part they were leaving might refresh itself. They had an understanding of the universe along with their own planet. They were thinkers and knew their designated purpose. They worked to bring the planet Earth to perfection. They had no equals in the universe. In terms of intelligence, they were second only to the great intelligence of the universe, or God. Approximately 10,000 years ago, in the human civilization that then populated what is now Europe, Asia, and the northern part of Africa and the Caucasus, individuals arose in whom the link with the intelligence of the universe was partially or wholly deadened. This point marks the beginning of mankind's movement towards a disaster of global proportions. The exact nature of the disaster is immaterial, ecological, nuclear, or bacteriological, either as forecast by scientists or foretold allegorically by ancient religions. Hold on there, Anastasia. I don't at all see how the appearance of such invalids can be related to a global disaster. Your choice of that modern term, invalids, is very apt. Yes, they were invalids, handicapped people. Now, when someone is deprived of sight, what do they need? Someone to guide them. And someone deprived of hearing? A hearing apparatus. And someone with no arms or legs? Prosthesis? But there was something much greater that they lacked. They did not have a link to the intelligence of the universe. Hence, the loss of the knowledge which would help improve the earth and govern it. Imagine what would happen if the crew of a super-modern spaceship suddenly lost 90% of their mental capacity. Not comprehending anything, they might start taking apart the paneling and building a fire in the cabin, or pull instruments out of their consoles to use for toys or decoration. Well, these people can be compared exactly to a demented crew like that. And these were the people, these were the handicapped invalids, who first invented the stone axe, then the spear, and it is in their thoughts that progressed over time to the invention of nuclear warheads. It is their thoughts that even today continue with incredible stubbornness to tear down already perfect creations and substitute their own primitive artifacts. Their descendants started inventing more and more, and in doing so kept tearing apart the super-modern natural mechanisms of the earth and creating all sorts of artificial social structures. Then people started fighting with each other. These mechanisms, these machines, were capable of existing all by themselves like natural ones. Not only could they not reproduce themselves, but they could not restore themselves after a breakdown, as a tree can, for example. And then they, the technocrats, required a vast army of workers to service these mechanisms, virtually transforming a segment of the general populace into biological robots. These biological robots, lacking as they do any individual capacity to learn the truth, very easily lend themselves to manipulation. For example, they were all too easily injected through artificial information media with the program, "We must build communism." Symbols were created for it, including label pins and flags of a certain color. Then later, through these same media, the program, "Communism is bad," was inculcated in another segment of the populace, and other symbols and colors were brought to the fore. And then these two groups with different programming end up hating each other, right to the point of physical annihilation. But this all began 10,000 years ago, at the time of a significant increase in the number of people deprived of a link to the great intelligence. Indeed, you could even call them demented, since there was not a single living creature capable of polluting the earth the way they did. In those far-off times, a few people were still left who had free access to the wisdom of the universe. They hoped that when mankind reached the point that the polluted air made it difficult to breathe, and the water became dangerous to drink, and all its artificially created life support systems, technological and social, proved themselves too awkward and more often led to disastrous imbalances, mankind would start having second thoughts. People standing on the edge of an abyss will start thinking about what being is all about. They will start pondering the meaning of their existence and purpose. Then many of them will desire to understand the truth of their pristine origins, and this is possible, but only under the absolute condition that the abilities inherent in man's pristine origins be restored. Few of the people who lived 10,000 years ago still possess these abilities. It was basically those heading up social groups, leaders of tribes. They began, or rather, at their behest, people began to construct special facilities made of heavy stone slabs. These enclosed an interior chamber about 1.5 by 2 meters in area and 2 meters in height, sometimes more, sometimes less. The slabs were placed at a slight angle, leaning toward the center at the top. Occasionally, these chambers would be hewn out of a single monolith. Other chambers might be hidden underground and covered by mounds of earth. On one of the walls of the chamber, a cone-shaped opening was cut into the slab, approximately 30 centimeters in diameter, and covered with a specially fitting stone plug. Into these tomb chambers would go people who had not lost the ability to communicate with the wisdom of the universe. Those still alive, and even those who might be born thousands of years hence, would be able to go to them and obtain answers to any questions that were of interest to man. This required sitting beside the chamber and meditating. Sometimes the answer would come right away, sometimes after a delay, but it would definitely come. Once these structures, and those that retreated into them, served as an information receiver. Through them it was easier to communicate with the great intelligence of the universe. These stone structures are the prototype of the Egyptian pyramids, only the pyramids do not constitute nearly as powerful a receiver, even though they are far greater in size. Their essence and function, however, is pretty much the same. The pharaohs who were buried in the Egyptian pyramids were also thinkers, and at least partially preserved the abilities inherent in man's pristine origins. But in order to obtain an answer to a question using the pyramids, those still living had to come to the pyramid not individually, but in large numbers. They had to stand along each of the 4 sides and direct their physical and mental gaze upward, as though skimming over the pyramid's oblique right side to its top. There at the top, people's gazes and thoughts focused on a single point, consequently forming a channel facilitating contact with the mind of the universe. Even today, it is possible to do the same thing and obtain a desired answer. At the focal point of everyone's mental gaze, an energy forms, an energy not unlike radiation. If a measuring device were placed at the top of the pyramid, right at the focal point, it would record the intensity of this energy. The people standing at the base, too, would feel strange sensations. Oh, if it were not for the sinful pride of the people today, the prevailing public opinion, the false perception that past civilizations were less advanced, people today would then be able to find out the real purpose of the pyramids. With all the attention modern researchers have paid to how they were built, they still have not been able to figure this out. And it is all so simple. In constructing the pyramids, apart from physical strength and various pieces of equipment, they always used mental energy to reduce the force of gravitation. Whole groups of people with this kind of an ability would assist the builders. There are people alive today who are able to move small objects with their will. But of immeasurably greater significance than the pyramids in terms of contact with the mind of the universe were the smaller stone structures which preceded them. Why, Anastasia? I asked. Because of the way they were constructed, their shape? because, Vladimir, living people retreated there to die, and their death was a most unusual one. They went into eternal meditation. What do you mean, living people? For what? What for? To create for their descendants the possibility of bringing back the power of their pristine origins. An elderly person, as a rule one of the wiser leaders or founders of a tribe, sensing his end was near, would ask his relatives and family to place him in a stone chamber. If he were considered worthy, they would grant his request. They would push away the heavy massive slab covering the top of the chamber. He would go into the stone chamber, and the slab would be pushed back into place. Inside, the man would be completely isolated from the external material world. His eyes would see nothing. His ears would hear nothing. Such complete isolation, the impossibility of even entertaining a thought about going back, but not yet having crossed into the next world, the deactivation of the usual organs of feeling, sight, and hearing, would open up the opportunity for full communication with the mind of the universe, and the comprehension of many phenomena, as well as of many of the actions of earth-dwellers. Most important of all, they would be able to subsequently transmit what they had discovered to those still alive, as well as to succeeding generations. Today you would call an approximation of such a state of mind meditation. But that is merely child's play in comparison with meditation in eternity. Afterward, people would come to the stone chamber, pull out the plug covering the opening, and begin thinking. Mentally consulting with the thoughts lingering in the chamber, the spirit of wisdom was always there. But Anastasia, by what means can you prove the existence of such structures to those of us living today, let alone the fact that people went into them for eternal meditation? I can. That is why I am telling you. Then how? It is very simple. After all, these chambers made of stone, they still exist today. Today you call them dolmens. You can see them and touch them, and you can verify everything I have told you. What? Where? Can you pinpoint their location? Yes, I can. In Russia, for example, in the Caucasus Mountains, not far from the cities you now call Gelendzhik, Taupse, Novorossiysk, and Sochi. I can verify that. I'll make a special trip there. I still can't believe such things exist. I'll definitely check to see. Do verify by all means. The local inhabitants know about them, but they do not pay any attention to them. Many dolmens have already been plundered. People do not understand their true purpose. They do not know about the possibilities they afford for contact with the wisdom of the universe. Those who have entered into eternal meditation can never be re-embodied in anything material. They have sacrificed eternity for the sake of their descendants. And now it turns out their knowledge and opportunities have gone begging. This has caused them great sorrow and anguish. As for proof that in the past living people went into these dolmens to die, this may be confirmed by the position of the skeletal bones discovered in them. Some were found in reclining position, others sitting in a corner or semi-reclining, leaning against one of the stone slabs. This, in fact, has been attested by people today. It has been described by your scientists, but they still have not attributed any special significance to it. No serious studies of the dolmens have been undertaken. The dolmens are being laid waste by the local inhabitants. Some of them have been using their stone slabs for construction of new buildings. Anastasia sorrowfully lowered her head and fell silent. I promised her. I will tell them what you said. I will explain everything to them so they will not go on plundering and laying waste. They won't mock them any more. They simply didn't know. Do you think you will manage to convince them? I will try. I will go to these places and try to explain. I don't know quite how at the moment. I'll find these dolmens, pay my respects to them, and explain it to all the people. That would be good. Then, if you were going to those places, please pay your respects to the dolmens in which my foremother died. Astonishing! How do you know that your foremother lived in these places and how she died? Anastasia replied, How could one not know, Vladimir? How one's ancestors lived and what they did? How could one not be aware of their desires and aspirations? My ancient foremother certainly deserves to be remembered. All the mothers in my family since then have learnt of her wisdom, and she continues to help me today. My foremother was a woman who had perfect knowledge of how to inculcate in her child through breastfeeding the ability to communicate with the mind of the universe. Even back in her time, people were starting to ignore the significance of this, just as people ignore it today. In breastfeeding an infant, the mother should never allow herself to be distracted by random thoughts, but concentrate all her attention on her child. My foremother knew what to think about and how, and consequently wanted to share her knowledge with everyone. She was not yet that old when she started asking the leader about being placed in a dolmen. This was because the leader was getting old, and she knew his successor would not accede to her request. Women were rarely permitted to go into a dolmen. The old leader revered my foremother and had great respect for her knowledge, and he gave his consent. Only he could not compel any menfolk to push back the dolmen's heavy stone slab and then reseal it once my foremother had entered. Consequently, this task had to be carried out by the women and women alone. But nobody comes to visit my foremother's dolmen any more. People are not interested in what she knows, and she so desperately wanted to share it with everybody. She wanted children to be happy and a joy to their parents. Anastasia, if you wish, I shall go to visit this dolmen and ask her how to breastfeed infants. Ask her what to think along this line and how. Just tell me where it's located. Fine, I shall tell you. Only you will not be able to comprehend her response. You are not a nursing mother, after all. You do not know what a breastfeeding mother feels. Only women, nursing mothers, are in a position to understand. Just go to the dolmen, go up to it and touch it. Think some good thought about my foremother. She will like that. For some time neither of us said a word. I was amazed at how detailed her explanations were regarding the exact location of the dolmens. Enough information for me to subsequently verify, and I was not about to raise any further doubts about their existence. I did ask her, however, to show me some proof of the possibility of contact with the invisible, and still incomprehensible to me, wisdom of the universe, to which Anastasia responded, Vladimir, if you keep on doubting everything I say, any proof I have to offer will seem incomprehensible and inconvincing to you. And I shall have to spend a great deal of time explaining. Don't be offended, Anastasia, it's just that your unusual lifestyle as a recluse. How can you call me a recluse when I have the opportunity to communicate not only with everyone and everything on earth, but with significantly more? So many on earth are surrounded by utterly lonely people just like themselves. These are real hermit recluses. It is not that frightening to be alone. It is much more frightening when one is lonely, even when surrounded by people. But still, I persisted, if one of our prominent scientists, let's say, could talk about that dimension, the one where, as you say, thoughts produced by human civilization reside, people would be more inclined to believe than just on your say-so. That's the way people today are. They look to formal science as an authority. There are such scientists. I have seen their thoughts. I cannot tell you their names, but no doubt they are renowned scholars by your standards. They have the capacity for prolific thought. You can hunt down the proofs you need when you get back, and compare them with everything I have said. Upon arriving in the Caucasus, I located the dolmens in the mountains near Golensik. I took some color photos of them. They knew about the dolmens at the local history museum, only they didn't attach any particular significance to them. I also managed to find the dolmen where Anastasia's foremother was buried. Paying my respects, I laid flowers on the moss-covered stone portal. As I looked at the dolmens, I realized that here was the visible and tangible proof of Anastasia's words. By that time, I had read the account from 1 Kings in the Bible about King Solomon and his relationship to the cedars of Lebanon. Not being much of a scholar myself, I wasn't about to leaf through a whole lot of scientific works, trying to find confirmation of Anastasia's words. but by extraordinary coincidences, this young recluse from the remote Siberian taiga seemed to be able to confirm from a distance the truth of everything she said, and in the language of modern science, people took it upon themselves to bring or send me scientific studies dealing with the existence of the mind of the universe. At the beginning of the book, I cited the conclusions of two academics, Vladimir Megré, member of the Russian Academy of Medical Sciences and director of the Institute of Clinical and Experimental Medicine, and Anatoly Akimov of the International Institute of Theoretical and Applied Physics in the Russian Academy of Natural Sciences, published in the May 1996 issue of Wonders and Adventures. I have been writing this chapter about the sacred sites of Gelendzhik right in the city itself. The text has been keyboarded into the computer by an employee of the Druzhya Friendship Sanatorium, Marina Davidovna Slabkina. Prior to its publication in the book, it was gone over by employees of the sanatorium, and something interesting has happened. On November 26, 1996, at 10:30 in the morning, Moscow time, an event occurred which did not have any obvious claim to significance, although I am certain that it will prove to be of planetary proportions. A group of women were making their way toward one of the dolmens in the mountains near the settlement of Shada in the Gelendzhik district. They were all employees of the Druzhya Sanatorium. In contrast to the tourists that sometimes visit these places to admire their natural beauty and gawk at this lonely mountain dolmen, these people, possibly for the first time in a millennium, came to the dolmen for a specific purpose of honoring the memory of their ancient forebear, to honor the memory of a person who lived more than 10,000 years ago, a wise leader of his people who, at his own initiative, was sealed into this stone crypt, alive so that over the millennia he could share the wisdom of the universe with his descendants. It is difficult to say for just how many millennia his efforts went begging. Traces of our own era's atrocities are seared into the ancient slabs of the form of modern graffiti and the forcibly enlarged aperture of the dolmen's portal. Visitors to the dolmen, at least over the past century, have thought little about its significance, about the person buried here, his wisdom, his desire and aspiration to sacrifice his life for the living. This is all eloquently attested in a number of pre-revolutionary as well as more recent monographs I've seen. Scientists, researchers, and archaeologists have been more interested in the dimensions of the dolmen itself, amazed and eager to determine how the multi-tone slabs were prepared and put in place. And now I looked at the women standing by the dolmen with the flowers they had brought to lay at the portal, and thought to myself, how many centuries or even millennia have passed since you last received flowers? Or, O illustrious ancestor, what does your soul feel now? What is happening at this very moment in the astral world? Have you, our distant and yet so close forebears, taken these flowers at the first sign that your efforts were not in vain? And among people living today, your descendants, there is an aspiration toward living one's life with greater conscious awareness. These are but the first flowers. No doubt there will be more and more. But the first ones are the most desirable, and you will be helping those who are now living attain the wisdom of the universe and the conscious awareness of being. You are our distant forebears. Participants in this visit to the dolmen included the sanitary inspector of the Gelendzhik Health Services, i.e. Pokrovsky. He had been invited by Valentina Larionova, in her capacity as local tour guide and museum curator, to accompany them and measure the dolmen's radioactivity. Mrs. Larionova told me that once on an excursion she had led to this dolmen, a tourist had brought along a Geiger counter which had showed a significant level of radiation. This individual later took her aside so as not to alarm the other tourists, showed her the counter, and told her about the presence of radioactivity at the dolmen. This time the health service inspector had brought along a fairly accurate radiation meter in its own special case. He began measuring radiation levels, even before we got close to the dolmen, and continued his readings right up to the dolmen itself, and even inside. While Miss Larionova was giving her talk to the group of women, I was seized by the fear that now this medical inspector would announce the results of his measurement for all to hear, and as this would not just be a tourist's observation, but an official conclusion, people might stop coming to visit the dolmen once they learned of the elevated radiation levels. Anastasia had told me that this radiation-like energy could come and go. It was controllable and could have a beneficial effect on man. But how would we, people of the modern world, look upon the opinions of this, let's admit, not very typical woman in contrast with the affirmations of modern science and facts established by modern scientific equipment, especially concerning radiation, which man is so fearful of today? Oh God, I thought, poor Anastasia. She wanted so much, after all, for people to take a different attitude, a more thoughtful attitude towards these ancient, extraordinary burial places of our ancestors, and now there would be an official pronouncement. Even in the best case, it would mean no more visitors to the dolmen. In the worst case, they might be destroyed altogether. People wouldn't even use them any longer for construction as they had done before. But if this mind of the universe really exists, if Anastasia can use it so freely, then they'd better come up with something, at least. Pokrovsky approached the group of employees standing by the dolmen and announced the readings on the meter. They were most extraordinary. I felt overwhelmed, first with amazement and then with joy. According to the readings, the closer one got to the dolmen, the more the Earth's background radiation decreased. This was all the more remarkable since, on its way to the dolmen, our group had passed through areas of elevated radioactivity. One would have expected the people standing at the dolmen, their clothing, shoes, etc., to have retained traces of this radiation. But in spite of this, the measuring device still showed decreased levels. It was as though an invisible someone had said, "Do not be afraid of us, people. We are your distant forebears. We wish you well. Take our knowledge, children." And all at once I realized, Anastasia! This phenomenon must be attributed directly to her. Yes, definitely to her. Even though she was thousands of kilometers away, she had drawn an invisible line across the millennia, linking those living today with an ancient civilization, thereby causing a surge in people's consciousness of an aspiration toward good. Even if it were just among a small group of people, it was still a beginning. And it was something absolutely real, since here in front of me was real dolmen, and here were real and tangible women, and real flowers that they had brought. According to scientific literature, dolmens are to be found near Tuapse, Sochi, and Novorossiysk, as well as in England, Turkey, North Africa, and India. This points to the existence of an ancient civilization with a single culture, whose members could communicate over vast distances. As Anastasia's information reaches more and more people, their attitude toward whatever other dolmens have been preserved will no doubt change. This in evidence by the reaction of the people of Gelendzhik. Indeed, the world's first excursion to a dolmen following Anastasia's amazing revelations about them took place in Gelendzhik, led by Valentina Larionova, the luckiest and happiest woman alive, as she describes herself. And here was a woman with 30 years' experience as a tour guide and a member of the Gelendzhik City Council to boost. But that's not all. Under Miss Larionova's guidance, a group of local historians began comparing already known facts. They spoke with long-term residents of the area and read biographies of saints, all of which enabled them to confirm existence in the Gelendzhik environs of the sacred sites Anastasia had spoken of. These were unique sacred sites of Russia, most of which were not even mentioned in a single tourist brochure. They included a Lebanese cedar, St. Nita's Mountain, a monastery, and the Sacred Hand Springs. People who are healed there tie a cloth ribbon around a tree. In Gelendzhik area, a church is now being restored. A brand of the Trinity Sergiv Monastery is under construction. I observed all this and thought to myself, look at all these sacred sites in just one small corner of Russia. Springs of healing waters, and here Russians are traipsing off to the ends of the earth to worship other people's gods. How many still forgotten sacred sites are waiting to be discovered in other parts of Russia? And who will discover them? I've done what I can. It's a pittance, of course, but at last it has given me some hope that Anastasia will show me our son. So, armed with rompers, toys, and baby food, I set off for the Siberian taiga to once again see Anastasia and meet my son. To be continued. In Anastasia's Ray, Editor's Afterword. Taking advantage of the frosty weather which had put a nearby lake under a thick shield of ice, I spent a Sunday afternoon skating with my daughter. The sky was overcast and a chilly north wind was blowing, but layers of winter clothing and energetic movement kept us warm. The same day, 26 December 2004, a local newspaper reported temperatures below 10 degrees Fahrenheit, negative 12 degrees Celsius, and featured an article on ice fishing. 5 days later, on New Year's Eve, we were having tea on the porch of our house, basking in the sun's hot rays and watching our daughter in her summer dress, smelling yellow dandelions and feeding honey to a bee that had joined our meal. After breakfast, we went for a walk by the lake, only to discover no traces of ice whatsoever. The sun's heat was so intense that the temperature in the shade climbed to 65 degrees Fahrenheit, 18 degrees Celsius, and a new and historic record high was set. The newspaper printed photographs of residents of Columbia, Missouri, wearing shorts and T-shirts, enjoying the outdoors on the 31st of December 2004, and commented on the unseasonably warm weather. And then I remembered the words of Anastasia had addressed to Vladimir Megré 9 years earlier. I am making it happen. Can you not feel the gentle touch of the breeze, feel its caressing embrace, and the warm touch of the sun's glistening rays on your face? Can you not hear the birds singing so cheerfully, and the leaves rustling in the trees you are sitting under? Love dissolved in space, for one can touch the hearts of many. I could not hear any rustling of leaves since it was the middle of winter, but the warm breeze, the birds' songs, and the sun's generous warmth were very real indeed. Anyone who witnessed this unique outpouring of sunshine in the middle of the Midwest winter could not help but sense something unusual in the air. But I felt I knew something special about the cause of this sudden weather change. It was on this day, the 31st of December 2004, that the English translation of Anastasia was completed, and it seemed as if nature were rejoicing at the birth of the book, the same way it had celebrated the birth of Anastasia's son with a warm, sunny day, pushing away the icy grip of the Siberian winter in 1996. A few days later, when the Anastasia text was laid out and sent to the printer, the cold returned and newspapers were replete with stories of ice storms and snowfalls, but the feeling of great accomplishment lingered. To take embodiment first in the printed book, then in the emails and telephone calls of its initial readers. Here is one email I received. A friend gave me the book Anastasia. I read it today outdoors while the sun shone warmly and the birds sang sweetly. My heart knows such an essence as her spirit, and I am still basking in the glow of the presence. After reading that Anastasia suffered a loss in strength after helping someone, I decided to send her distant Reiki. I know from experimenting with my kids that it has a healing effect. Immediately after sending the distant Reiki, I heard her say thank you. Today I sent her distant Reiki again. Soon after I was finished, I began smelling the sweetest scent of a flower, and the scent went into all my sinuses. My sinuses feel different now. I feel such an inexpressible feeling of love and joy. It's like being in love, but in a totally different way. If you were here right now, I would hug you and let you feel it. Thank you for this sweet and precious gift. Even as this and other heartwarming messages showed me that the book is producing the same response among English-speaking readers as in other parts of the world, I was still wary of the welcome the translated edition of Anastasia would receive in professional and academic circles. But the first impressions shared with me by its early readers, students of psychology, Russian literature, forestry, ecology, sociology, and philosophy, are most encouraging. One scholar, after reading just the first chapter, asked me if she could have a pendant of cedar wood. Dr. Richard Bolstad, a psychologist from New Zealand and author of Resolve, a new NLP model of therapy, was quick to recognize the value. It turned out he had learned about the Ringing Cedars series from his aunt who lived in Germany and had read the best-selling German translation. He said she had been so greatly impressed by the books she would call him from Germany and read entire chapters in German over the telephone. This story made me wonder as to how many aunts call their nephews on the other side of the globe to read a chapter from a book they particularly liked. Not very many, I would imagine, which means a book that does elicit such a response must certainly possess a power to set hearts aflame, regardless of the language in which it is read. I became even more confident about the Ringing Cedar's power to transcend national boundaries after I received the following message from Europe from Nara Petrovic, editor of the Slovenian translation of the series. This is what he wrote. Without any advertisement, the book became a bestseller, mainly by readers spreading the news from mouth to mouth. In many libraries, the waiting lists were soon getting longer and longer, and in bookstores, the sales were very good. Thousands of readers in Slovenia and Croatia are more than enthusiastic about the books. Whoever has read books and has a vegetable garden was compelled, even out of sheer curiosity, to try out the ideas explained in the first book. And when I spoke to people, they confirmed that everything works. One man even called us and told us that he had made a beehive according to Anastasia's detailed instructions and was amazed at how well it worked. One of the publisher's relatives spent a lot of time in his garden even before he read the books. He loved to work in the garden and thus had cultivated a very healthy and tasty crops. But after he implemented Anastasia's instructions, the tomatoes and some other vegetables yielded so well that all his relatives and friends were surprised by the tastiest vegetables they had ever eaten. One lady who lives near my city planted pumpkins for the first time in her garden according to Anastasia's instructions. That year there was a great drought. All her neighbors' gardens were dry with very little vegetables, while the pumpkins in her garden were huge, although she took almost no care of them. I also have accounts of people in North America who, after either reading the Russian version or learning about Anastasia's ideas from their Russian friends, have followed her advice on gardening to obtain remarkable results. This is very encouraging. In the light of how all the incredible revelations of the series have been playing out in real life, there is no escaping the fact that your dream, Anastasia, is entering upon our world, and it really seems as though our world is beginning to change. There are certain people who feel and understand you. They show evidence of new strength coming from somewhere, and that is changing the world. The world is becoming just a little better. In this, English speakers are no different from other readers that embraced Anastasia's ideas earlier. The book you have written will circulate all over the world, and it will give you and others a power greater than mere physical or material strength. The only difference is that in Russia and in other countries, the dream has been unfolding for a number of years now, while America, only along with the rest of the English-speaking world, is at the very beginning of this radiant path, which it may now choose to follow. Wes Jackson, a well-known proponent of ecological approaches to agriculture in the United States and director of the Land Institute, has passionately argued in his writings that there is no other possible way of development for this country but a return to the land. What if he is right, and there is indeed no other way? Then it is probably not by chance that two of the central chapters in Vladimir Megré's 8th book, The New Civilization, convey Anastasia's version of America's future. A beautiful one. Even as my family are now packing up, getting ready to move from Colombia to a small farm lost amidst the beautiful Ozark Mountains with an aspiration apart from continuing on the Ringing Cedars series, to live their ideas in real life. I have an ever-growing feeling of awe at this clear realization that what Anastasia dreamt about is already coming to pass in America as well. It is coming to pass. Within the 2 months since Anastasia was published in English, there have already been 2 artistic performances of dance and song inspired by her. The dancer, a young breastfeeding mother and a future midwife, told me how her heart had instantly felt and accepted Anastasia's essence as her own, and how she now feels her presence and support on the path she is following. She told me she felt herself simply overflowing with the energy of love and wanted to share it with everybody. Then, as she described her captivating dance and song as Butterfly Women, I stared at her in awe, experiencing a strange sensation in my heart and head. The remarkable thing is that I have a large painting by Alexander Razboinikov, who designed the cover art for the series, hanging on the wall in my home. This painting, called The Butterfly Dance, depicts Anastasia dancing in a whirlwind of butterflies and is inspired by Book 3, The Space of Love, which has not been translated yet. But The Space of Love is being translated and is scheduled to see light on the 23rd of July, 2005, a day on which Dachnik Day and an all-Earth holiday will be celebrated in America for the first time. True to Anastasia's promise, this holiday will indeed begin in Russia, but then it will become the most fantastic holiday for the world as a whole. And then a wave of warmth will cheer the heart, and over the world will be unfurled a new dawn. I can already see the twilight of this dawn, and I know that I am not the only one who does. Columbia, Missouri, USA, Earth Day, 22 April 2005. Leonid, Sharashkin.